The air in the Tailhook Tavern was thick with the ghosts of 1,000 sea stories. It smelled of stale beer, salt-dusted leather from the flight jackets slung over chairs, and the faint, sharp tang of industrial cleaner that never quite won the war against the grime. Neon signs, shaped like anchors and fighter jets, buzzed with an insectal hum, casting a jaundiced glow over the scarred wooden tables. Each table was a map of past revelries, etched with the rings of wet glasses and the occasional gouge from a misplaced dart. This was the unofficial parliament of Naval Air Station Oceana, a place where lies were polished into legends and truths were drowned in cheap whiskey. In the corner, near the humming coolers, a man was mopping the floor. He was old. His age was not just in the deep lines that carved canyons into his face or the snow-white hair that was thin on his scalp. It was in the deliberate, unhurried economy of his movements. He moved with a profound stillness, each sweep of the mop a practiced, meditative stroke. His janitor's coveralls were gray, worn soft at the elbows and knees, but immaculately clean. His name was Silas, and he was as much a fixture of the tavern as the sticky floors and the cracked vinyl of the bar stools. He favored his right leg, a noticeable limp that made his progress across the floor a slow, rhythmic sway, a cadence of pain and persistence. He did not look up. His world was the 10-foot circle of linoleum in front of him, a universe he was methodically setting right. The double doors of the tavern swung open with a bang, letting in a gust of humid Virginia air and a tidal wave of noise. Lieutenant Commander Evan Thorne and his squadron mates. They were the new gods of the flight line, F/18 Super Hornet pilots, young and invincible, clad in the casual arrogance that came with mastering a 20-ton machine that could outclimb the sun. Thorne was at their center, the alpha of the pack. He was tall, with the kind of chiseled, confident features that seemed factory-issued to fighter jocks. His smile was a weapon, quick and sharp. His eyes, a pale, cold blue, scanned the room not to see it but to own it. "Look at this place," Thorne boomed, his voice slicing through the low murmur of the bar. "Smells like my grandfather's attic." His friends laughed, a chorus of loud, easy agreement. They swaggered to the bar, a phalanx of green flight suits and polished egos. Thorne ordered a round, his voice loud, making sure everyone knew he was in command, even here. His internal monologue was a constant hum of self-satisfaction. Another perfect sortie, nailed the carrier landing. The LSO said it was a museum-quality trap. Of course it was. He felt the familiar thrill of being the best. It was a drug, and this bar, filled with lesser men, was where he came to get his fix. His gaze swept the room again, landing on the old man mopping the floor. Silas was in his path, a slow-moving obstacle between the bar and their designated table. Thorne's lip curled in faint amusement. He nudged one of his fellow pilots, a lieutenant named Riggs. "Hey, Riggs, watch this." Thorne strode toward Silas, deliberately not altering his path. He stopped just short of the wet floor, his polished black boots gleaming under the neon light. "Hey, Pops," Thorne said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Gonna be done with your little art project anytime soon? We got actual business to attend to." Silas finished his current sweep of the mop. He did not look up. He simply pulled the bucket back a few inches, clearing a path. He was steady, perfectly steady. The quiet refusal to engage, the utter lack of deference, was a spark on Thorne's very short fuse. He expected people to jump when he spoke, especially old janitors. "I'm talking to you," Thorne snapped, his voice a little louder. This time, Silas slowly straightened up. It seemed to take an effort, his back stiff. He finally looked at Thorne. His eyes were the color of a winter sky, deep and startlingly clear. They held no fear, no anger, no deference. They were simply observant, like a deep, cold well. "Path is clear, Lieutenant," Silas said. His voice was a low gravel, like stones rolling in a slow river. It was not disrespectful. It was simply a statement of fact. The lieutenant was a subtle correction. Thorne was a lieutenant commander. A small thing, but in the rigid hierarchy of the military, it was a grain of sand in the finely tuned machine of Thorne's ego. He's doing it on purpose, Thorn thought, a flash of hot anger rising in his chest. This old fossil is trying to disrespect me. That's Lieutenant Commander to you, Janitor, Thorn snarled. And I'll tell you when the path is clear. Right now, it looks like you're loitering. On a naval installation, that's a security risk. He was being ridiculous, and he knew it. But he was committed now. The eyes of his squadron were on him. The eyes of the whole bar were on him. The conversations around them had faltered. The low hum of the tavern was replaced by a tense, waiting silence. The air grew heavy. At a small table near the back, Petty Officer Third Class David Chun watched the scene unfold. Chun was an avionics technician. He was quiet, smart, and had a knack for seeing how things connected. He saw the injustice of it. He'd seen the old man, Silas, 100 times. Saw him cleaning the barracks, the hangars, this very bar. The man was a ghost, silent and efficient. He never bothered anyone. Chun had also heard the stories. Whispers from the Master Chiefs and the old civilian contractors. Fragmentary tales about the quiet janitor with the limp. They said he'd been in the shit. They said he was here because he liked the sound of the jets. They spoke his name, when they spoke it at all, with a kind of hushed reverence that Chun couldn't quite decipher. Now, watching Lieutenant Commander Thorn puff up his chest like a preening bird, Chun felt a knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach. This was wrong. This was deeply wrong. Thorn took another step closer to Silas, invading his personal space. What's with the limp old-timer? Thorn sneered, a cruel grin spreading across his face. Trip over a bucket? Or did you just forget to get your geriatric pills this morning? His friend snickered. Silas's expression did not change. His gaze remained fixed on Thorn, unwavering. It's old, Silas said, the single word carrying the weight of a history Thorn couldn't possibly comprehend. Thorn's frustration boiled over. The old man's calm was a mirror, and Thorn didn't like the reflection. He saw a bully, a peacock, and the recognition infuriated him. He needed to break this man's composure. He needed to win. Old, I'll show you old, Thorn said. He jabbed a finger at Silas's chest. I am an officer in the United States Navy. I am a combat-rated aviator. I represent the tip of the spear. And you? You're a floor mopper. When I speak to you, you will show respect. You will say, sir, you will stand at attention if I tell you to. He was losing control, his voice becoming a shrill instrument of his own insecurity. I want to see your credentials, Thorn demanded, his mind grasping for any tool of authority. Your base access ID. Now, this was an absurd overreach. A pilot had no authority to demand credentials from a civilian contractor in a bar. Silas didn't move. My supervisor has my paperwork, he said, his voice still unervingly calm. I'm your supervisor now, Thorn shouted. Give me your ID. Chun, at his table, felt his heart pounding. He knew he had to do something. This wasn't just a bar fight. This was an abuse of rank. An offense against something older and more sacred than the chain of command. Thorn's eyes darted around, looking for another angle of attack. They landed on a small, almost invisible object pinned to the collar of Silas's gray coveralls. It was a tiny pin, no bigger than a thumbnail. Tarnished silver, shaped like a swift, diving bird. It was so worn that its details were nearly erased. Thorn reached out and flicked it with his finger. What's this piece of junk? He mocked. Your reward for 20 years of perfect attendance. Did you get that from a cereal box? The moment Thorn's finger touched the pin, something shifted in the old man's eyes. The deep, cold well suddenly had a fire at its bottom. For the first time, Silas's placid exterior cracked, not with anger, but with something else. Memory. The stale air of the bar vanished. He was no longer in Oceania. The air is thin and tastes of iron and pine. It is brutally cold. Snow squeaks under his boots, a sound loud as a gunshot in the suffocating silence of the Bavarian forest. He is 24 years old, but feels 1,000. He is leading a 3-man team. Their mission, exfiltrate a high-value asset, a physicist who wants to defect. The pin on his collar is new then, gleaming silver. A gift from the asset, a small token of his family's craft. A bird of prey. They are compromised. The sound of dogs barking echoes through the frozen trees. The frantic, guttural shouts of East German border guards. They run. The physicist, a man of papers and chalkboards, stumbles. A burst from an automatic rifle tears through the trees, and the physicist goes down, a cry torn from his throat. He is not dead. His leg is shattered. They cannot carry him and make the extraction point. They cannot leave him. He holds a universe of secrets in his head. If they capture him, the work of years is lost. The lives of dozens of agents in the network are forfeit. His two teammates look at him. He is the leader. His call sign, earned on a previous mission for his ability to appear and disappear without a trace, is Spectre. He is the Spectre. He makes the impossible choices. The dogs are closer now. They're baying a promise of death. He makes the call. He orders his men to take the physicist's briefcase of notes and run for the border. "What about you?" One of them, a young man from Ohio named Miller, asks, his eyes wide with fear. "I'll buy you time," he says. He stays with the physicist. He gives the wounded man his sidearm. "For them. Not for you," he commands. Then he turns back. He moves away from the border, drawing the pursuit toward himself. He is a ghost in the trees, a phantom leaving just enough of a trail. He leads them on a chase through the frozen hell of the forest, doubling back, setting small, disruptive traps. For 3 hours, he is hunted. Finally, they corner him in a rocky ravine. A grenade lands near him. He throws himself sideways, trying to shield his body behind a granite outcrop. The explosion is a white-hot fist. It lifts him and slams him against the rock. Shrapnel tears through his right leg, severing muscle and shattering bone. The pain is a supernova, a white light that consumes everything. But his team is gone. The asset's knowledge is safe. He lies in the snow, his blood a steaming, dark stain, and waits for the guards to find him. He will spend the next 4 years in a Stasi prison. For years of interrogations, starvation, and solitude. They never break him. They never learn his name. They never find out about his unit. When he is finally traded in a prisoner exchange on the Glenick Bridge, he is a shadow of himself, but his spirit is untouched. The limp is the price he paid. The pin is the only thing he has left from that night. The memory, sharp and cold, lasted only a second, but it changed the landscape of Silas's face. David Chin saw it. He saw the flash of ancient pain, of horrifying clarity. He saw a man not being harassed in a bar, but a man reliving the moment his life was broken for a cause no one in this room would ever understand. That was it. Chun stood up, his chair scraping loudly in the silent room. He walked, not too fast, toward the back exit, pulling his phone from his pocket. His fingers were trembling as he scrolled through his contacts. There was a number he had, a number given to him by his own mentor, a master chief who had once told him, "If you ever see something so wrong it turns your stomach and no one else will listen, you call this number. You don't abuse it. You don't even think about it, unless it's a break glass in case of fire moment." This was that moment. He pressed the call button. Back in the bar, Thorne misinterpreted the flicker in Silas's eyes as fear. He felt a surge of triumph. He was finally breaking him. "What's the matter, Grandpa?" he taunted. Remembering a bad dream, he decided to press his advantage, to deliver the final, crushing blow. He grabbed the front of Silas's coveralls, bunching the worn gray fabric in his fist. "I gave you an order, old man," Thorne hissed, his face inches from Silas's. "Show me your ID, or I'm going to have you arrested for trespassing on a secure military installation. You will be cuffed and dragged out of here like the trash you are." It was the final overreach, the physical contact, the irreversible threat, the point of no return. At that exact moment, the double doors of the tavern didn't just open. They exploded inward, slamming against the interior walls with a deafening crash. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the evening light, were 2 armed master-at-arms in full tactical gear. Between them stood a man who radiated an authority so absolute it seemed to suck the very air out of the room. Rear Admiral Jonathan Blackwood, the base commander. He was a tall, lean man with a face that looked like it had been carved from granite and left out in the wind. His uniform was crisp, his chest a constellation of ribbons, his 2 stars gleaming on his collar. His eyes, cold and furious, swept the room. Every sailor and officer in the tavern, including Thorne's stunned cronies, shot to their feet and snapped to attention. The silence was absolute. It was a tomb. Thorne froze. His hand was still clutching Silas's uniform. His face was a mask of confusion and burgeoning terror. The Admiral? Here? Why? His mind screamed. Admiral Blackwood's gaze passed over the Ramrod Strait sailors, over Thorne's terrified friends, and landed on the scene in the center of the room. He saw Thorne, a lieutenant commander, his prize pilot, with his fist balled in the uniform of an elderly janitor. The Admiral's face, already hard, became a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. But he did not speak to Thorne. He did not acknowledge his existence. He strode forward, his footsteps echoing like hammer blows in the cavernous silence. The two master-at-arms followed, their presence a promise of swift and terrible consequence. Blackwood walked right past Thorne, forcing the younger officer to stumble backward and release his grip on Silas. He stopped directly in front of the old janitor. For a moment, the Admiral simply looked at Silas, his hard eyes softening with something that looked like awe and reverence. Then, in a move that shattered the reality of every person in the room, Rear Admiral Jonathan Blackwood, commander of the entire Naval Air Station, snapped his heels together and executed the sharpest, most profound salute of his life. It was a salute of utter, unconditional respect. "It is an honor to see you again, sir." The Admiral's voice boomed, clear and strong, resonating with an emotion no one present had ever heard from him before. Silas, who had not flinched, not even when Thorne had grabbed him, slowly raised a hand and gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. A gesture between equals. "Jonathan," Silas said, his gravelly voice quiet but clear. "It's been a long time." Thorne stood, paralyzed. His world had not just been turned upside down, it had been vaporized. His brain struggled to process the input. The Admiral, saluting. A janitor? Calling him sir? It was impossible. A hallucination. Admiral Blackwood slowly lowered his salute, but his eyes remained locked on Silas. He then turned, his body moving with the slow, deliberate motion of a predator. His gaze fell upon Lieutenant Commander Evan Thorne. The warmth and reverence vanished, replaced by an Arctic coldness that was terrifying to behold. "Lieutenant Commander Thorne," the Admiral said, his voice dangerously soft. Thorne flinched as if struck. Admiral," he stammered, his bravado utterly gone, leaving behind a terrified young man in a green suit. "I was in my office," the Admiral began, his voice rising with each word, "when I receive a call on a line that has not been used in 5 years. A line reserved for the gravest of emergencies. The call was from a petty officer 3rd class, a young man who, unlike you, apparently remembers what honor and respect look like." He paused, letting the weight of his words crush Thorne. "He told me that one of my squadron leaders was publicly humiliating a civilian employee, so I came to see for myself." Blackwood took a step toward Thorne. "I arrived to find you, a man who has been given the privilege of leading sailors and flying a $90 million aircraft, physically assaulting a man old enough to be your grandfather. A man who, I might add, is employed to clean up the filth you and your friends leave in your wake." Thorne was trembling now, sweat beading on his forehead. "Admiral, I didn't." He was being insubordinate. The Admiral let out a short, sharp laugh devoid of all humor. "Insubordinate?" he roared, the sound echoing through the bar. "You dare to stand there and use that word?" He pointed a finger at Thorne's chest. "You are a child playing dress-up in a uniform you have not earned. You think because you can handle a stick and rudder that you're a warrior? You think because you wear these bars on your collar that you're a leader? You are a disgrace." Blackwood turned to address the entire silent room. "You all see this man?" he said, gesturing to Silas, who stood quietly, his mop handle held loosely in one hand. "You see a janitor. You see an old man with a limp. You see a ghost who moves through your world, invisible to you." He turned back to Silas. "Sir, with your permission, I would like to tell them who you are." Silas gave another one of his small, almost imperceptible nods. The Admiral faced the crowd again. "This is not Silas the janitor. This is Chief Warrant Officer 5 Silas Croft, retired." And the uniform he used to wear was not gray coveralls. It was the uniform of the United States Army's most elite, most secret special operations unit. A unit so clandestine, most of you have never even heard its name. A collective gasp went through the room. In 1983, the Admiral continued, his voice taking on the cadence of a historian reciting a sacred text. During the height of the Cold War, a vital NATO intelligence network in East Germany was about to be compromised. A single asset held the key to its survival, and he needed to be brought across the Iron Curtain. The mission was deemed impossible. A suicide run. No one would take it. No one, except a three-man team led by a 24-year-old operator whose call sign was already a legend in the shadows. Spectre. The Admiral's eyes bored into Thorn. Spectre and his team went in. They got the asset, but they were compromised on exfiltration. They were hunted by Stasi border guards and their dogs. The asset was wounded, unable to move. Blackwood's voice dropped, becoming thick with emotion. Spectre made a choice. He ordered his team to get the asset's intelligence to safety, and he stayed behind to draw the hunters away. Alone, he led the entire enemy force on a chase, buying the time his men needed to get across the border. He saved the network. He saved hundreds of lives. He pointed at Silas's right leg. You see that limp, Thorn? You asked him about that limp. He got that limp when a grenade blew his leg apart in a ravine while he was saving the free world. He was captured. He spent 4 years in a gulag that would make hell look like a holiday resort. They tortured him. They starved him. They did everything they could to break him. But he never gave them his name. He never gave them his unit. He never gave them a single thing. The silence in the room was now one of pure, stunned awe. Every eye was on Silas, seeing him for the first time. They saw the lines on his face not as age, but as a testament. They saw his stillness not as frailty, but as unbreakable strength. The man you just assaulted, the Admiral's voice was now a blade. The man you called Pops and Trash is a recipient of the Distinguished Service Cross. He was recommended for the Medal of Honor, but it was downgraded because the mission was, and remains, too classified to publicly acknowledge. He has bled more for this country than you could ever imagine. He has suffered more than you could endure in 1,000 lifetimes. Blackwood stepped right up to Thorn, his face a thundercloud. And what have you done, Thorn? You've reached the pinnacle of your existence by mocking his sacrifice. You've used the authority this Navy foolishly gave you to humiliate a hero. A giant. He jabbed his finger into Thorn's chest, right where his pilot wings were pinned. As of this moment, Lieutenant Commander, you are relieved of all duties. You are stripped of your position as squadron leader. The Master-at-Arms will escort you to your quarters, where you will remain under confinement until your formal disciplinary hearing. He leaned in closer, his voice a venomous whisper. Your wings are forfeit. Your career is over. I will personally see to it that your next assignment involves scrubbing grease traps with a toothbrush in the most remote, God-forsaken corner of the globe I can find. You will have plenty of time to reflect on the meaning of the word respect, am I clear? Crystal, Thorn whispered, his face ashen, his eyes hollow. I can't hear you, the Admiral roared. Crystal clear, Admiral. Thorn choked out. Get him out of my sight, Blackwood commanded. The two Master-at-Arms moved in, each grabbing one of Thorn's arms. They were not gentle. They spun him around and marched him toward the door, a broken, disgraced officer. His friends, who had been standing frozen in a state of shock, now looked at the floor, their faces burning with shame. They didn't dare move. As Thorn was hauled out, the Admiral turned back to Silas. The fury on his face melted away, replaced once again by that profound respect. Chief Croft, Silas, I am so sorry. I am deeply, profoundly sorry for the dishonor you have been shown on my base. Silas looked at the Admiral, and then at the door through which Thorn had vanished. A flicker of something that looked like pity crossed his face. He's young, Jonathan, Silas said, his voice the quiet rumble of a distant landslide, full of fire and fear. He thinks the enemy is out there. He gestured vaguely toward the sea. He hasn't learned yet that the real enemy is in here. He tapped his own chest. He'll learn, or he won't. It was a grace note, A moment of wisdom and forgiveness that was more damning to Thorn than any punishment the Admiral could devise. "Let me get you a ride home, Silas," the Admiral offered. "Please, it's the least I can do." Silas shook his head, a small, gentle motion. "I've still got the floor and the head to finish," he said simply. "A job's a job." He bent down, a motion that was clearly painful, and picked up his mop bucket. He turned to leave, to continue his work. As he moved, the crowd of sailors and officers, which had been frozen in place, seemed to awaken. They didn't applaud. They didn't cheer. They did something more profound. They parted for him. They created a wide, clear path, stepping back with a reverence usually reserved for visiting dignitaries or flag-draped coffins. They stood in silence, watching the old janitor with a limp make his slow, steady way out of the tavern, his dignity not restored, but revealed. It had been there all along. They just hadn't had the eyes to see it. The epilogue to that night was written not in headlines, but in personnel files and training manuals. Lieutenant Commander Evan Thorne was never seen at Oceana again. Rumor had it he was reassigned to a remote weather station in the Aleutian Islands, where his primary duty was, indeed, maintaining the facility's sanitation systems. His promising career was a crater, a cautionary tale whispered by flight instructors to new, cocky ensigns. Admiral Blackwood, true to his word, instituted a new base-wide training program. It was mandatory for all hands, from the rawest recruit to the most senior officer. It was called the Croft Initiative, a course on naval heritage, humility, and the recognition of valor in unexpected places. The story of the janitor and the admiral became a piece of base folklore, a modern legend that served as a permanent reminder. Petty Officer David Chun received a quiet, personal commendation from the admiral and found his own career path suddenly and inexplicably smoothed. He was a man who knew when to make the right call. And Silas Croft finished his shift that night. He mopped the floor in the men's restroom, cleaned the mirrors until they shone, and emptied the trash. The next day, he was back at work, a quiet ghost moving through the bustling world of the Naval Air Station. He declined the Admiral's offer of a pension increase and a formal ceremony. He didn't want the attention. He didn't need the accolades. He had made his peace with his past long ago. He was content in his quiet life, in the simple rhythm of a job well done. Sometimes, on his days off, he would drive out to the coast and sit on a weathered bench overlooking the Atlantic, watching the F divided by a -18s practice their carrier approaches. He would watch them scream across the sky, powerful and perfect, and a small, sad smile would touch his lips. He liked the sound of the jets. They were the sound of a promise he had kept. The silence he had earned for himself was a fortress stronger than any prison they had ever put him in.